This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. This week, Ben Hawken joins us at the Roundtable, and I introduce his episode as talking about a career shift, because that was the topic that was pitched to us. But the conversation goes in a lot of different directions, so much so I wouldn't say we talk about career shifts at all. But we do talk about following your dreams. Ben is a first-time novelist. We talk about his background, the inspiration for his book, how he managed to write his entire novel in just 1 year while maintaining a busy career and family life. We talk about drafting and editing and not being precious with your words. There's all kinds of great stuff in this conversation today. I just didn't want to get to the recording, introduce it as a talk about career shifts, and then not be that. So, with that said, I think you will enjoy this conversation with Ben Hawken. Looking for expert support and a writing community? My Novel Journey coaching program is perfect for experienced novelists seeking mentorship and connection. Benefit from personalized guidance, detailed feedback, and a community that shares your passion for writing while getting the challenges writers face. Enhance your craft, achieve your writing goals, and confidently polish your novel. Join me now and take your writing to new heights. Go to wordessential.com/fiction coaching and book your free discovery call today. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn and I are delighted to be joined by Ben Hawken. Ben is the award-winning creator of several beloved video series and a small handful of children. Previously, he was the author of 0 other books and graduated with honors from a community college as well as a real college. He lives outside Seattle with his family. So welcome, Ben. We're so excited you're here with us.
Thank you for having me. And every part of that bio is true. I stand by every word of it.
Good to know. I think it's the most amusing bio I've ever read. When I first read it, I giggled when I got to the, and a small
Mission
handful
accomplished.
of children. Yeah, I'm like, delightful. I already like you. So we thought we would talk about career shifts and following your dreams. And this is a topic you proposed to us after you found the Be a Guest form on the website at storyworkspodcast.com. And I just want to throw that out there so any future guests who are listening are aware that it exists. But yeah, so tell us what you were doing before and bring us into this career shift.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of writers are going to recognize the path, which is keep working, keep your day job if you can, because, health insurance is fantastic. And, a salary is great while you are pursuing some of these creative endeavors. And that is certainly what I have done. And when I had this idea for this novel, which, by the way, is named Chandelier, available on Amazon right now and at benhawken.com. That's HAWKEN. You guys can edit all this out. But
we will definitely keep it in and
yes.
Be linking to it in the show notes as well. So.
And when I jumped off onto this idea, I immediately knew that I had something that I wanted to pursue. Right, I knew that much right away. The idea kind of came to me at least the first 2/3 of the book, and as I started writing, it occurred to me, oh, I need a protagonist. Oh, I need a conclusion. Oh, these people need backstories. But 2/3 of it was there right away, and I immediately started deleting apps off my phone that I was worried were going to distract me. I started blocking out nights and weekends. I was driving kids to volleyball tournaments and typing madly in between games, and never during a game, in case any of my kids are listening. but only in between games. And I really made this a priority. The same way that, when you think about your day job, for lack of a better word, you really do block out time and intensity and focus. And that's what I was doing every moment I could with the book. And part of me is just being obsessive. I love to just dive into things, and I treated this book the same way. It was a passion project and a labor of love, and it was thrilling, and it took forever, and I loved it. But you really do have to carve out that time and be super, super deliberate about it.
Mm-hmm. So, what was your day job? What was your career before you decided to write the
Yeah, so I've
book?
worked. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've worked for years in marketing in the technology industry, and I came up on the agency side, and then started working for the companies themselves, which was a great background when it comes to when you have to keep spitting ideas and coming up with new ways to iterate on a problem. I mean, I treated so much of this book as a series of. I mean, I don't want to make it sound small or insignificant, but so much of the book was word problems, essentially. I mean, what is a reasonable way to conclude this chapter? If there's a problem right now, what is a realistic way that this could be resolved? And so often in the business world, you are thinking about, hey, we have this news we want to share. What is a relatable, what is a relevant, what is a meaningful way that we can share this externally? And it's not exactly the same muscle, but you do go through those same processes of how can I make this relevant and meaningful? And I was really lucky to have so many years of having done that, when over and over again in my book, I have situations that I've never experienced necessarily. So how do I navigate through these? How can we make the dialogue sound like authentic? Is this how people really talk? Is this a satisfying resolution to this problem, or am I just putting a bow on it because, if you're writing network television, you've gotten to minute 48, you got to put a bow on everything right away. How can I avoid doing that? Right? How can I make these really be satisfying moments? And luckily, I had a lot of hours trying to solve problems in similar ways, if not exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. So, what are the parallels and the differences, or the similarities and differences between the type of creative muscles you were exercising before in your career and then the ones that play out in writing a
Yeah.
novel? You just said the problem solving you did
Mhm.
before really helped you, but I would imagine the format is so different and the type of storytelling is so different, going from, marketing
Mhm.
to a novel, very long form. So, yeah, I'd like
There's
to hear
two things.
more.
There's one thing that I think connects those, and stop me if you've heard this comparison before. I think it has to do with Homer, like Greek myth, which is in ninth grade Latin at Meeker Junior High. Mr. Spears introduced Homeric story structure to us, which was every story has the three parts as Homer set it up, and they've all been kind of following that since then. It's separation, meaning your main character has a crisis; they are separated from their normal way of life. Then there is initiation, where your character accepts what has happened and begins to solve their problem. This is Act Two. And then there is return at the end, where they have resolved their problems. They've gotten back to the place they want to be. This is Feifel Goes West. This is Return of the Jedi. This is Home Alone. It is all of these. This is, separation, initiation, and return. And in business, when we are sharing messages externally that are going to be necessary for our customers to continue to do business or continue to work, and this doesn't matter, it doesn't even matter what type of work you're doing. I mean, I've worked in technology, but this is applicable broadly. The same three steps apply. In the terminology is a little different in that we look at, hey, a customer has a problem. You as a customer may also have this problem. Here are some solutions that our company offers. And now here are the benefits. It's the same three steps. It's problem, solution, benefit. And when I would talk through to the people I worked with and to teams I worked with, or even when we had like new hires or MBA students come through and I'd have a chance to chat with some of them, I would explain this structure. And out of the gate, especially when you're talking to other creatives, because I was always on the creative services teams, it seems like this structure is going to crush our artistic dreams and our flow. Like, how can I work within a structure? I'm an artist with an E and an accent at the end. And really, it is within that structure, you can do anything you want. You just have to hit certain beats so that the human mind can follow the structure, follow the story from beginning to end. Now, to not all the novelists who are writing this is all very like second nature. Like even if they never used these terms before, they understand it intuitively, and that's why they are writing. That's why they're good at storytelling. But when you explain the structure and then say within those buckets, go anywhere your mind takes you. The more creative you can be within, the better you're going to be at your job as a professional working in marketing or advertising or public relations, really any of those. Work within those three to have structure, but just go bananas inside the structure. And that was super helpful when I began to write the book, because as I mentioned before, there were certain scenarios that I have not personally experienced. Luckily, and people read the book and be, well, thank God you have not. But I mean, I can still understand there is a separation here. Now they're initiated, they're in it. What is a reasonable way to respond to that? And now within that reasonable, I'm trying to establish what's reasonable. If something wild sprung to mind, I would run with that and see where it went, because it's easy to delete if it doesn't work. But life is very sporadic. You come up, things pop up out of nowhere. And a lot of times that's really helpful on the page, because now you have something for the other character in that scene to react to. They get to have an authentic reaction. So this is the 9-minute answer to your 1-minute question. But, I think that there were that story structure that Mr. Spears claims Homer developed, and I believe him, is if only there was a way to check, really does sing through in a lot of different storytelling modalities. And that's the first time I've ever used modality in a sentence. So that's great.
Well, excellent. Yes, we love having firsts on the show. I mean, so I want to hear about the origin of your novel, Chandelier, and the courage it took to dive in and write it. I think when we're talking about career shifts, there's so many people out there who say, I have a story in me. I would love to write this book one day, but they've got the job that eats up 40 to 80 hours of their week. They've got the kids, they've got the volleyball practice, they've got the health insurance, they've got the mortgage, or whatever their individual life looks like. And so they don't take that next step of starting to write the story. And even if it isn't a career shift for other people, even if it's just a hobby or a bucket list item, or, so talk about the origin or inspiration of the story, and then what pushed you from having the idea to actually doing it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was something that I was actually thinking about in real time while I was doing it a few times, because this was a very unnatural action. I mean, everyone's first novel is unnatural, right? I mean, it is. I'd been writing my entire career, but in 2,000 and 3,000 word blocks. And then a little later in my career, I was doing a lot of speech writing, and that's longer form. You might be in the 60 to 75 minute range then. But even at that point, you are maybe 45 pages deep on a Google Doc or Microsoft Word. If you are writing it out word for word, a lot of times you're just working out bullets. In fact, one of the guys that I wrote speeches for was incredibly talented on the stage, and he would talk for 60 minutes and have 10 bullets, right? I mean, so that is an easy speech writing job. There were ones that were much more word for word. And so, but that's still, I was topping out at maybe 30 pages. Now that I think about it, 30 pages of text, when Chandelier, my new novel, available on Amazon and at benhawken.com, was when I was, thank you, Kathryn, when I was writing that. I mean, on the Google Doc, by the time I was done, was just shy of 600 pages. So it was very, very unnatural. And to answer the first part of your question, now that I've come at it from a different angle, is I think the way I came up with this idea is something that's going to be very relatable to your audience, which is, like most first-time novelists, I got home from a concert at 2 a.m. and I'd eaten too much. And so I was sitting on the couch waiting to get sleepy and watching conspiracy theory videos on my phone, on YouTube Shorts, to be clear. I don't have that kind of attention span. And I saw one that was odd, and I thought, wow, how would that affect you once you grew up? And how would that affect your relationship with other adults? And like, what would you tell your kids? And then 2/3 of the story jumped into my head. So pretty relatable. I mean, go see hip hop concerts in Seattle on August 18th, 2023. And a year and 11 days later, you can upload a book. It is not, I mean, that was my path, which worries me about a sequel, because if I have to just pick a story apart out of the ether, who knows what the next one will look like. This one came fairly fully formed, if not 2/3, and certainly in that 40% range, was already 40 to 50% was kind of just came to me immediately. But it was my job to get it down onto the page. And so there I was at 2 a.m., still very full and not ready to go to sleep. And I started dictating into my phone for the better part of 2.5 hours, just notes after note. I learned that if you talk to Siri for more than 90 seconds, it stops and you have to start again and keep dictating. And I did that about, like 80 times. And I copied that over into a document the next morning. And, I'm very strike while the iron is hot while I had the idea. And over the next 2 weeks, I built that outline to around 45 pages. Which turned into about 620 pages once I had it fully written out. And that outline was helpful because there were some chapters where I said they are talking in the woods, and I knew why they were in the woods, and I knew that chapter would be them discussing, and then kind of maybe 2 bullets about what they were talking. Other chapters were very specific, like there is a problem with this on the Russian frontier. This has been detected, it's misinterpreted as this, and now there is escalating tensions worldwide. And I would have 20 bullets for some chapters, and I'd have 2 for others. And I kind of knew how I wanted to get in and out of these chapters, but I left myself enough room to, hey, if something really interesting pops up in chapter 7, I'm going to jump ahead to chapter 11 and make a note so that we don't forget that detail. And I'm going to make a similar note in chapter 13, like, hey, don't forget what happened back here in chapter 7. And I would allow my outline to kind of trickle down, all those details to trickle down and keep things straight, because I didn't want to miss any of this. I didn't want to be on the 3rd rewrite and say, whatever happened to that one person who can shapeshift into a horse, which is not a part of my novel, Chandelier, available on Amazon. But it was, but I really wanted to keep thank you. Yeah. I wanted to keep those details straight, but I wanted to have that structure, but I wanted there to be enough flexibility that as random ideas popped up, I could just run with them. And part of that was not being really precious with, this idea is great, I had it. Like, it's like part of being in the creative services industry is you pitch 9 ideas, 9 or 10 ideas, 9 of them get thrown out immediately, and 1 needs some work. Still not ready for prime time. And that's been my whole career. Is I developed a muscle where I could keep coming up with ideas until we got one that was right. And as the older I got, and the more I learned to let the data and the market and more information guide some of those decisions, your batting average gets a lot better. But your batting average is always pretty low. It's just you just hit more home runs maybe as time goes on. The metaphor doesn't hold up, but that's what I was doing with the book. Was I was willing to always take those really big swings and to find something that works. But there's times you get I'm sure both of you have done this a million times, and most of your listeners too, which is you look at a paragraph and you're like, it's pretty, it's well written, doesn't work, not for us, and you have to just rip and replace. And that was one of those puzzles I was talking about earlier, is getting those things to fit together and being really self-conscious sounds bad, maybe self-aware, really self-aware of stylistically and your tone, and are you being really, really authentic, or are you giving yourself a really convenient way out? Like, is this solution too easy? And that was something I had to learn as I went.
Yeah. So before we go any further, I want to ask what the premise of Chandelier is. Give us kind of the sales copy version of what the book is about. I think everyone's curious by now.
So part of that answer comes from those videos I was watching at 2 a.m. here in this leafy suburb of Seattle, which was Project Stargate. Was a real program in the 70s and 80s and the early 90s in the United States. And they essentially were trying to teach children and young adults how to project their consciousnesses into the Soviet Union to spy on them. If that sounds ridiculous, technically it is. And they worked on it a real long time. And then people found out what they were doing, and they were using LSD to help them do it. The movie Men Who Stare at Goats that the Coen brothers directed. It's also a book, is loosely based on this. And then they shut it down because they had never according to their records, gotten anything usable out of it. There was a lot of promise, and sometimes things would seem to work, but they didn't know what was happening or why or how. Just that sometimes something happened, but nothing scientifically rigorous, according to their information. And so one day, a group of children and young adults woke up in the Bay Area where they were running this, and they were the most important tools in the U.S. government's fight against the bad guys. And they went to bed that night having been told this never was anything. None of this was real. None of this worked. Go home and start a life. You're 12. Later. See ya. And that was wild to me. It was wild to me about like what that whiplash is going to do to you if you're young. And then you have to go home and like now you're going to in the next year, you're going to be in sixth or seventh grade. You're going to be going to like second period PE and getting told you're doing push-ups wrong after being the most important weapon in the U.S. government's arsenal. Like, what does that do to you? What does that do? And then as you grow up and you have to look at other adults and you're like, you guys have no idea what this world is really all about. And then you raise kids and you're like, you kids, you know what I was doing when I was 12? Like, go take out the garbage. Like, these are all things. And being a parent of kids who are roughly that age too was meaningful in a certain way. So my book is not about that program I just described, but the premise is there is a project during the Cold War era that is exceptionally important. They are listening and trying to learn, and they're using young adults, children. And one day it is also there's also a realization from one of the participants that this isn't working. Thank you for your time. Go be a 12-year-old. And how do you re-enter the world after that? And now skip ahead as the book jumps around in time a bit. Once again, Chandelier, available on Amazon. benhawken.com is and now jump ahead to being an adult. And now there are new events around the world which are problematic, which are teetering on the edge of global conflict. That sounds a little more dramatic than it is in the book, but for the sake of hyperbole and promotion, now the world is on the brink of chaos, Alida. And the things this grown-up learned as a child are very valuable to this current situation, but very understandably, she doesn't want anything to do with it. So what kind of choices does she suddenly have to make? Because sometimes her civic duty may be foisted upon her. She may not have a say in whether she wants to be a part of this or not, considering it's something different than what she remembers. And there are a lot of conflicts there. That what do you wait for the world to take action upon you? Do you wait to be acted upon, or do you take action? Do you do something to prevent being sucked back into this? You have kids that are involved. You have a spouse who is involved. You have a career. You have like a life that you've built for yourself, separate from this almost like other person who did all these things when you were a kid. And there is just conflict after nuanced discussion. Like, how do you explain to your family, hey, so there's this thing I used to do. It might come back now. I mean, those are very nuanced and difficult discussions. And that was where that authenticity came from is, I didn't want this to be like, I used to do Stranger Things in a basement of like a warehouse somewhere, and now I have to go back and fight monsters. Like, it's not that. It's very easy. If I had just made this all about monsters, it would have been easy. But how do we have these be like real things that are, it doesn't immediately turn into a fantasy novel? Nothing against fantasy novels. I just didn't think it worked for what I was trying to do. But, using magic or just saying, oh, there is a technology that does all this would have been super, super easy. So I found myself for hours at a time trying to find real, whether it was technology or real physics or real, scientific phenomenon that were actually real that could serve the plot. So that when I inevitably get fact checked, well, that's not really a thing. No, it's really a thing. And that was and so, I'm sure both of you have done this before. It's 4 hours of research to finish a sentence. I mean, over and over again. That's what I was doing. Because I wanted everything to be real. I didn't want it to just be pure, just hovercraft and laser beams, right? It wanted to be like real things. Another long answer. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that is a great premise. I'm just marveling at the fact that I think you said it took a year, and was it a year and 11 months?
So I got home from the concert on August 18th. I guess technically it was the 19th, but let's say it was still the 18th while I was driving home. And then that was the 18th, and then I uploaded it to Amazon on August 29th. Or I guess it went live. 1 year and 11 days. I guess if
when
you
you're in
count
11 days.
it took like 4 days for it to show up once I uploaded it. But yeah, it was live and available to buy on the 29th.
So with the amount of research you just described, the page length, everything that goes into writing a novel, this being your first novel, and you've got a family, and you maintained your job while you were writing this book?
I did, yeah.
How the heck did you do all that in 1 year?
Yeah, well, as I looked at how the pages kept racking up, I kept telling myself, there is a certain quality to be found in quantity, I hope. Is what I've always been very fortunate to have. Mass producing content was always the easy part, and then it was narrowing it down, whittling it down. Being a unforgiving and unsentimental editor is what is. If you can't do that, then being prodigious with content isn't very valuable at all. Producing 90 pages of garbage is inferior to producing 2 really good pages, I believe.
So
and
true.
From early on in my career, and I'm sure you found this, I think your readers will have found this, that you can really get in a groove and start cranking out some material, which is nice because it balances the days where you can't. But you can really start knocking out a lot of pages. But can you be just as assiduous, for lack of a better word, with your editing pen when you go back through? If you're writing, if on an odd numbered day you went off and knocked out 20 pages, on the even numbered day, can you come back and be really thoughtful about what's in there? And maybe 2/3 of it doesn't work. Maybe half of it doesn't work. Can you do that? So I've always been fortunate throughout my career that the writing of a lot of material was easy. That always came easy, for better or for worse. But the muscle then I had to develop. This is like the 4th time I've mentioned muscles. Anyway, the muscle I had to develop was going back through it unsentimentally. And so that is what I would do for, long stretches, is just give myself a goal. Like, I'm going to get to the end of this chapter, research included, and tomorrow I'll go back through it. And ideally, Stephen King has that saying that your second draft should be your first draft minus 10%. And I would really try to find those places to tighten. And, I just rinsed and repeated that process. I mean, there were mornings, there was lunchtimes, there were nights, and there were weekends. And writing quick. And, I think that those are all good times you can be in front of your laptop. But something that really helped me was when I was if I was trying to mail a package and I'm standing in line at the post office, that's going to make it sound like I was writing this book in the 80s. But if I'm standing in line somewhere, if I'm stuck at traffic somewhere, if I'm waiting at the DMV, those are all places where I would have my phone out with that document open, like literally adding pages, not adding notes. I was adding line after line after line of the book. And, being at airports, like just typing, talking into my phone while I was, pushing a kid on a swing. Sorry, kid on a swing. But at parks, I was fortunate that I was writing this a lot of different places. I would say probably a quarter of this book was written on my phone, just because I could talk into it and just share these things and then go clean them up later. So that year, actually, I fit a lot of extra time into that year in 11 days because I was able to keep contributing to the book so many places and so often, rather than just when I was here in my tastefully decorated office. So it's, and so that year, and so I was able to fit the writing and then the writing of it and then 3 rewrites into that time.
So what you're saying is you did nothing else.
Sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I
other than
really
the
did.
swing, pushing the swing, and sitting at volleyball practice.
Yeah, you hurry and work out in the morning, and then you go write a couple of pages. That was the routine. And I mentioned before, I took every other fun thing off my phone that wasn't this, just so that I could focus. Because being able to produce this much material is a symptom of a mind that is going to run in a lot of different directions. And if there is a distraction, I will then start running with that. I'm not going to call that ADHD, because there's people that really suffer with like clinically significant versions of that. I wouldn't say that's what I have, but getting really easily distracted is right in my wheelhouse. So if I could channel that energy into just keep writing, I was able to make a lot of progress in short amounts of time. But that's just how I'm specifically wired. I don't think I would ever teach a seminar on how to do it in just a year. I was just fortunate to be able to channel a couple of personality traits, you might even call them conditions, into being able to produce a lot of material.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I do want to actually, on that note, kind of offer something to the listener who started listening and said, oh, great, I'm one of those people. I've got a story in me and I've been trying to figure out how I can write it. Who at this point in the show is thinking, but I'm nothing like Ben. There's no way I could do that. Now I feel hopeless, right? Kathryn raises her hand. So, I mean, you've mentioned some great things like taking distractions off the phone, writing in every spare minute and not just waiting until you can sit at your desk for 3 hours and such. But what else? And Kathryn, you too, what else can we put out there for listeners who right now are going, holy cow, that's so incredible. I could know, like, I won't even start, right?
Oh my gosh.
Kathryn, you go first.
This is ways that I struggle right now. And I'm much more of I have to carve out time for my brain to get into the space where I can write. So if I was, pushing my daughter on the swing, one, she would never let me have enough brain space to write while I was pushing her on the swing because I have to listen to her. But but I feel like I have to have that space to set aside and to calm my brain and to get into the writing mode. But I do think there's a lot of value in that idea of don't make it so specific as to like, I have to be sitting at my desk or I have to have my laptop. And I don't have anything where I can just like type on my phone right now. And I'm thinking that maybe I should have a document open that at the very least I can type into and then copy paste. And I just didn't even I don't have that right now. So I'll sit down on the couch and I don't have my laptop with me. I don't automatically start thinking, oh, I should write for the next 15, 20 minutes. Which I totally could if I just have that available. So I think the availability of it, how you were speaking about just, like I have it on my phone. I had to, however much on my phone, I did talked into my, Siri, like all these things. I haven't set that up for myself, which is an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not a thumb typer. I don't even like texting more than a few words at a time because I find this really tedious. And every time you go for like the M, it ends up being a backspace and it annoys the heck out of me. But you have voice notes, right? Every phone comes with some sort of voice memo. And then if you're really verbose, you can download that and put it into a transcript, make a transcription of it. So that might be a way. What other techniques did you use, Ben, or what recommendations can you make for people?
Yeah, you probably just saw me scrounging around here. I was trying to find something I use, which is a foldable keyboard that Microsoft makes that, I mean, it's basically like 1.5 times the size of the width of your iPhone, that it folds out into a almost 3/4 size full keyboard. And you just charge it with the USB cable. It hooks up on Bluetooth. And there were a lot of times on airplanes where I was madly typing away because your thumbs or your voice just aren't. I mean, that little keyboard got a lot of miles put on it. That was super helpful. But that is almost really to a tactical level. I think at an approach level, which I think a lot of listeners are probably you hear the fact that my fingers just can feel that notch underneath the J, where you can find where your hands are on the keyboard. My fingers feel that notch and the words just keep coming out. That's an obnoxious thing to say, though, because that's not normal. Once again, it's a condition more than a talent. And but at a high level, strategically, what can you do? I think that the most important thing I did to keep the momentum was having that outline that I mentioned earlier. And now an outline does sound a little bit 8th grade English. I get that, a little bit 8th grade language arts. But that was really useful to me in terms of just keeping the writer's block from creeping in terms of I always knew where I was in the story and I knew where I was needed to get in and get out of a chapter, but there was enough empty space in the middle that I could still have those spontaneous moments that kept me as a writer interested, which a lot of people overlook. You have to also stay interested in the story while you're writing. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to be interested in it if you're not. Now, granted, you can also be super interested in stuff that everyone else hates. And anyone who picks up Chandelier, available now on Amazon and benhawken.com, there's going to be some parts that maybe are not as interesting to you as they are to me. I'm fascinated by every damn page, but but that's because all your kids are beautiful to you. You have no ugly kids. But I mean, that outline really had enough empty space in it where I could let things spontaneously happen. And I knew where they needed to end. So I was never in too much danger of, geez, I'm going down a rabbit hole. Like, what am I doing? I got to pull out of this dive and conclude the chapter at some point. Or we need to have a line of dialogue again sometime soon. It's been just exposition. And that outline was super, super helpful. So, like, I believe if you have that kind of structure that allows you to still be spontaneous and real and authentic and interesting and to surprise yourself with some of the things that popped up. I constantly was getting surprised, like, whoa, that was weird. All right, let's see if it works. And keeping in mind that the nice thing about writing is unless you're a journalist or writing features, there is no deadline. Unless you are like really hooked up to a publisher and they need to have your novels on every airport bookshelf by August or something, then also please contact me and tell me how to do that. But other than that factor, I mean, there is no buzzer you're trying to beat on getting your book done. Do yourself the honor of taking the time to get it where you want it to be. If that means, hey, I was hoping to publish this week, I even told my mom to look for it on Amazon, but do another rewrite or do another read through, if nothing else. Like, tighten up those things. You see a big block of exposition, turn that into a page and a half of a conversation. I mean, do those things. There is no buzzer. I mean, do yourself the honor of taking your time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. Go ahead, Kathryn.
The idea of that outline as motivation. I also feel like there's a lot of that where you're kind of saying, I kept it top of mind. I kept it in the front of my brain. I kept, because I had this outline. I knew where I was going. I knew what was coming next, that I was thinking about it constantly. And therefore that helped you have the motivation to, sit down or stand up or type into your phone, whatever it is. Right. And it's like, I think that's where my brain struggles, is keeping it top of mind. Even though I have a fantastic outline, it's like it gets pushed down to the back so frequently that it takes me a little bit longer to get back into that mindset and that motivation. So I think using that outline strategically to keep it in the front of your mind, I think is a really cool tip.
It is. I was loving that remark too. And I was just talking to a coaching client about storyboarding and saying that I think we're able to produce a draft faster when we've done the work of storyboarding, because we get everything organized in our minds and we know where we're going. And it's not about being rigid. We should have room to be creative and explore and go down side roads, but it gives us the marks we're aiming for along the path from the opening page all the way to the end. And this reminds me, we had a guest whose name I'm blanking on right now. I'm really sorry to say, who was talking about how every night she would read the end of what she had written that day. And then when she was sleeping, it would kind of percolate in her subconscious mind. And then she would get up and she would have ideas and solutions to start the drafting. And if you just keep that outline or that storyboard present and you're touching base with it continually, not necessarily reading it or like, oh, this is what I'm writing next. This is, but just having it present could make a huge difference with the rate of output.
Well, I mean,
in a good
we
way.
Want to do this, right? Like, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Like, we all want to be motivated to do this. This is not something we're being forced into. So, remind yourself of how much you want to do this.
As I was writing, a friend of mine who runs the ultra marathons through the mountains, we're talking like 100 and 150 sometimes mile races through the mountains. He was telling me about one particularly challenging race he had done. And it's race in the sense that everyone who finishes is a champion, in my opinion. I mean, it's like but he said every 10 miles on this particular race was a sign that said, remember, you paid to do this. And it's almost the opposite for a writer, right? It's like, remember, this is awesome. Like, you're good at this. No one who's super bad at writing sets off on a novel. I don't believe that happens. I think if you're super bad at it, you make it halfway through a chapter and you realize that it's just a Seinfeld episode that you listen to in your sleep or something. Like, I think if you're that far along, like, you deserve to finish what you started. And, you deserve to get to the end of that race. But like I said earlier, there's no buzzer to get. There's no buzzer you have to beat to get there. And it's, just do yourself the favor of being kind to yourself along the way.
We will continue our conversation with Ben Hawken in our next episode of the StoryWorks Roundtable podcast. In the meantime, make sure you check him and his book out at benhawken.com, or just visit the show notes at storyworkspodcast.com. My newsletter, A Room Full of Books and Pencils, is growing every week with new reflections, writing tips, and transcripts of the podcast. It's also where I make announcements about things like upcoming writing workshops and coaching sessions. Check out A Room Full of Books and Pencils at booksandpencils.substack.com. Thank you for listening to the StoryWorks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.